Let's say China. 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 China.
Chased by the deep state, fighting for independence, thinking about revolution, looking for alternative solutions. The enemies of the deep state will tell you what others even don't dare to think. Manuel Ochsenreiter and Mateusz Piskorski.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the geopolitical podcast, DieGutenMenschen, Public Enemies of the Deep State. We are again Manuel Ochsenreiter, that's me. I am editor-in-chief of the German news magazine Zuerst, and I speak to Mateusz Piskorski on the other end in Poland. Hello, Mateusz.
Yes, hello from the bunkers again of the prolonged quarantine, yes.
And we are still healthy. We are still healthy.
We are still healthy and alive.
That is
quite optimistic, yes.
Yeah, so if one of us dies, the other one can still do the podcast, so that is safe.
I wouldn't be so sure. The podcast is unique because of two of us, yes.
That is true. That is true.
Yes.
So one guy.
And true and very modest.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Today. We will speak a little bit about the conflict between the United States of America and China, and what is very funny, what just happened recently. Mateusz, did you notice that China has is not just a rising dragon and a country becoming more and more important also for everything what is happening on the whole world, also economically but also politically. Did you notice that China has also great trolling capacities?
Yes, well, in several places all over the world, I guess, yes.
So we all know that Donald Trump stopped all payments to the WHO, to the World Health Organization, and China jumped in with $30 billion US dollars. So they are now giving a donation to the WHO in the Corona war. So
I guess that they are ready to, and first of all, they are capable of donating everyone and everywhere. I mean, every international organization. Yes.
So that is the latest news, and I think it already shows perfectly the conflict between these two giants. Mateusz, what do you think? What are we witnessing right now? I mean, nobody was taking China seriously 50 years ago or even 40 years ago, but China has done really a high-speed development to an industrial and political giant.
Well, some years ago, as you remember, we have visited China and spoke with some academics, professors there. And as you remember, they told us that they will be ready for a global superpower status, but not so fast. I mean, they have estimated that it will take another 15 to 20 years for them to become a global political superpower. Of course, they have permanently raised their weight on international relations, but first and foremost, they were focusing on economic projects and geo-economic ideas like the One Belt, One Road initiative. Since 2012, if I'm not wrong, the chairman Xi Jinping decided to first create a new system when it comes to, let's say, the internal structure of China, because he decided to stay in power without any limits as a strong leader. And secondly, they have announced that they have some international, let's say, ambitions and ideas about their status for the future. Yes, because you are right that 50 years ago, even in the 1970s, 1980s, even under Deng Xiaoping, who has let's say reformed their economy, yes, and opened their markets, China didn't seem to become a kind of superpower in the future. Yes, I mean, economically, yes, That's right. But politically, no one dreamt of China as a superpower. Yes.
Yes, what is also interesting in the context. I mean, you and I, we are the same age, and we both witnessed as 13, 14, 15-year-old boys how the communist bloc collapsed. And I think you also grew up with the axiom, the belief you were told in schools and later on at university, that the communist system cannot survive in this world. So that is what I remember very well. So I was always told, well, you will also see China will also collapse sooner or later because it's a communist system and communism doesn't work. We saw it all with Soviet Union. But what we witness today is that all these teachers, all these professors and analysts were totally wrong. We see a communist state really blooming economically with China. What do you think about that?
You know, when it comes to the economic and also political social model, I guess that those who are talking about communism as a kind of utopia were thinking about, let's say, the old school, classical way of understanding communism. Yes, in that vein, I mean, they were just reading the communist manifestos and analyzing them as unrealistic and so on. But since many years, we have noticed to a smaller scale definitely before, but we have noticed that several countries who were communist, but let's say they chose their national unique way to communism, like, well, let's say former Yugoslavia before, yes, like partly Romania under Ceausescu, and many other smaller countries like Cuba, for instance, were quite successful. And the same goes for China. I mean, they have mixed the communist ideas with their own unique national tradition of Confucianism. And I guess that, well, they have created a unique idea, a unique ideology, which is uncomparable, not only with the, let's say, things we are imagining when we think about communism, about classical communism, but also with any other existing political or social system in the world. The system they have is purely national and based on Chinese traditions, yes?
Absolutely. And I mean, I understand that the existence of China and the Chinese success must be a non-stop threat to all the neocons, not just in Washington but also in Brussels, because again, we grew up with the axiom, with well, almost like a religious belief, like a religious credo, that only a liberal democracy can be economically successful. That was the credo I think I heard in school, I heard at university, and every liberal journalist who thought he writes something smart was writing that you can only be successful economically if you are a liberal democracy. China shows every day that you don't have to be a liberal democracy of Western style to be successful. And I think that is the embodiment of the threat. What do you think?
Well, definitely on the level of consciousness of political identity, they pose a kind of ideological threat, although they do not impose their own ideological system. Let's say contrary to the US and the West. They are so successful, I think, because their view of the world is based on respect of different political and social traditions in different countries. If you compare, for instance, their expensive policy in economic expensive policy in Africa, they do not impose any kind of ideology or political system upon the local elites, yes? They are rather, let's say, tolerating the local traditions, trying to work with the people as the people are there, not to change their minds and so on, while the West is, imposing its ideological dogmas everywhere, yes? And this is one of the advantages of the Chinese in the modern world, I guess.
Absolutely. As you know, before I went to my holidays in Africa, I was working in the Bundestag, in the German parliament, as an expert, mainly with the Committee for Economic Development. That is precisely the committee. I think you have the same committees in all the Western countries, which do so-called development help in Africa. And you won't believe how big the number of projects is which have nothing to do with economy and with business. These are projects like gender mainstreaming, gender equality, seminars for liberal media, democracy seminars. So we have it even on that level that the West is not just exporting products or or helping, for example, to build a factory or to do some business investments, but always trying also to impose the ideas. There is nothing like this comparable happening by China, and you're absolutely right. And what makes it interesting is if we compare this on the ideological level, it is really like the West, mainly with the United States, but also Europe, is doomed in this belief that you must also export your mindset, your set of political ideas, and that it is an integrative part of this Western ideology. I think you cannot separate it. The Western ideology cannot say we let everyone develop as they want, since you strongly believe that you are in possession of the best, and every human in the whole world should participate at your mindset, at your catalog of values, like they call it, while the Chinese part sees the value in the difference and in the respect, as you say. And I think that is the main future strength what the Chinese path has in this, and the West is at the same time doomed as long we are all following, or not you and I not, but as long the European countries are following this basic idea with this catalog of values. What is your take on that? Because you have to liberate yourself from all that before you can do then respectful politics towards others, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's very simple to let's say make some liberal mainstream politicians or journalists think about what they are doing and talking, for instance, about China. You know, I remember several years ago I have invited a Chinese delegation of Chinese politicians, activists to Poland. And it was in the times when I was a member of Polish parliament. And at a common press conference with the Chinese, one of young Polish journalists asked the Chinese about, the ordinary set of questions for the Chinese from the liberals about Tibet, about Taiwan, about the Uyghur people in Xinjiang province, and so on, about the human rights issues and so on and so forth. And I answered to the journalists if they would like the Chinese to show us and to impose on us their way of life and their political system here in Europe. They answered, of course not. And then I appealed to them, then don't do it when it comes to China, yes? Do not try to teach them how to deal with their internal issues. And I think that, the Chinese are quite sensitive when it comes to those issues. I guess that at least since 2012, since Xi Jinping came to power, they are becoming more and more active when it comes to formulating their own political agenda and geopolitical agenda as well, yes. But I don't know, I'm pretty sure that in almost all European countries, for instance, the books of Xi Jinping have been published and disseminated in thousands of copies, yes. In all respective languages. This is a clear sign that the Chinese want to present themselves as as a country, as a superpower, who has something to offer, something which is completely different from the Western the US dominated point of view, yes? And that's why we have this conflict, which is quite deep, yes, of course. But well, if you look at what is going now on with the coronavirus thing and so on, I think that this conflict will be quite serious in the coming months. Because, you know, I have a hobby, I don't know if you share my hobby in this particular case, to trace the speeches and initiatives of the most dumb and stupid American congressmen.
No, tell us more about that.
That's a great hobby. So I guess that first you have heard about
very time eating.
yes, and exhausting, you know, morally and psychologically exhausting. But anyway, they have made 3 very significant anti-Chinese steps lately. First one, I guess you have heard about it, was to sue the Chinese government for coronavirus pandemic. They want some, even not billions, but trillions, I believe, dollars for compensation for the coronavirus, and that's why Fox News is announcing that it's a Chinese biowarfare and so on all the time. And I think that there are already about 4 courts in the United States which are going to consider all those charges, and that, of course, some politicians, mainly the Republicans, support this idea. And do you think it would be serious that an American court could, for instance, let's say, decide that China was somehow guilty of coronavirus pandemics?
Well, I mean, what we have in the past you forgive me if I would call such a court trial grotesque, because nothing is impossible in the United States.
Manuel, I'm not so sure. You know why? Really? You know why? Because there was a second step. Miss Marcia Blackburn, quite interesting, politician from the US, of course, from the Republican Party, from the Senate, has claimed that well, you have to give back, to return all the debts only if you are returning them to your friends. And since China is not a friend, she claims openly and publicly that the US shouldn't pay anything for the US bonds which have been purchased and bought by the Chinese National Bank. And it's already billions of US dollars. I mean, it's a loan, yes.
I think we speak now about up to 10% of the US state debts. They are somewhere in China, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So the first step was in the courts in the US. The second step was Miss Blackburn, and the third step lately was one of the initiatives of a famous American Republican politician, Ted Cruz. I think you remember.
Yeah, of course.
Who claimed that the US should sanction China with at least so severe sanctions like the ones who are now against the Russian Federation. And he has already even proposed an act of law when it comes to anti-Chinese sanctions, where they have put several, not only politicians from China, but also state companies, or those companies, because I don't know if you have noticed, but according to the Americans, almost all private companies from China, like Huawei, like Tencent and so on, are connected to the state, or even to the intelligence there in China. Yes? So according to the American point of view, everyone is state owned, and according to this logic, the thing with the courts might be quite serious, I guess. Why? Because you know what can happen, yes? I mean, the American court agrees that the Chinese are guilty for this coronavirus crisis. And let's say the American court would decide that the Chinese should pay around, I don't know, $2 trillion or several billion dollars and so on, yes? Then the Americans, according to this court rule, can freeze all the assets, not only of the Chinese state, not only they could reject paying back the debts to the Chinese, yes, but they could also freeze the assets of Chinese private companies which are operating in United States. More of that, they could also try to, let's say, press all other countries in the world, particularly European Union and European countries, to do the same, yes? What do you think about such a possibility?
Well, seen in that context, I mean, the danger of such a development seems quite real. Anyway, I think also about what would be the result of this. Do you think that any country in the world would have the guts to give the United States of America a loan or anything after such a step? Because I mean, any country except Germany wouldn't do that. As you know, also a huge part of the German gold reserves are where they are in the United States of America, so they could also easily confiscate.
So you can forget about them, I guess.
Yes. Yes. Maybe they are not even there anymore.
Yes.
You know that German parliamentarians who wanted to see our gold reserves were not permitted to see them. So
yes.
that happened. And that happened recently. I don't speak about the 1970s. That happened just some years ago. So that was a big topic, by the way, in Germany, the gold reserves. But what I wanted to say is that in that case, if the United States really go that far, I think nobody in the whole world would ever give them any loan again, because you always step into the danger that they would simply find something and do a law trial and confiscate. What do you think? I mean, I think that would be. They can do, this is a thing you can do one time. And when they do it with China, maybe all the others are happy that it was not done with them. But I think then this is the end of your business and economic reliability on so many levels. And they should be aware about that, the Americans.
Well, I totally agree. But on the other hand, you know, there should be an adequate symmetric answer to the US now. I think that part of this answer is a strike against the dollar system, yes?
Yes.
In international economy and in international trade. And I guess that the Chinese will do that. I mean, first of all, they will start to propose other currencies than dollar when it comes to their external trade. Secondly, I'm also pretty sure that they will be using quite sophisticated methods to, let's say, decrease the role of US dollar in international economy. For instance, they have already introduced in several Chinese provinces the new cryptocurrency, which somehow reminds, of course, Bitcoin and so on, but is official and it's based on the Chinese yuan. That could be another strike against the dollar system of the world. Yes, so I guess that the Chinese answer to all those let's say speeches and claims of American politicians, which seem so funny for us, could be far more serious than the things which have been said by Cruz or Blackburn, yes. But well, let's see. I guess that the Chinese have the instruments for a symmetric, at least symmetric answer. But then we are coming again back to the idea that the world will be, to some extent, bipolar now. For a certain period at least, and that all other countries, like even the superpowers like Russia, like I don't know, India, Brazil, South Africa, European Union or Germany, France separately, yes, will be somehow, let's say, motivated by both sides to cooperate with them in this confrontation. Yes, what do you think about it?
Yes, and I think that is maybe one of the very important facts which are maybe right now not seen in Washington, or not seen in its importance, because if we observed clearly in the last years the behavior of the European countries, especially the countries in the European Union, of course we have anti-Chinese rhetorics and all that, but we have at the same time, and then it becomes interesting, also approaches, friendly approaches on the business and on the economic level. I think, and maybe it's also stupid to think that, but I'm not sure. I think that if the United States are going too far with China, they might more lose the support from Europe. And I think that we had this already now last year when everyone was discussing the economic war between China and the United States. The European countries were not as loyal to the United States as Washington thought they might be. In contrary, we had a lot of European leaders who said we are not joining into the economic war on American side if we have a disadvantage by that, and that is very clear. So we don't have any benefit by joining in. So I think the times of this blind loyalty towards the US are over, also thanks to Trump, by the way, because I think since Trump is president in the United States, it is for the Europeans much more easy simply to say no to Washington. And I think in the upcoming American-Chinese conflict, precisely that element, to say no to Washington, can play a crucial role.
Yes, exactly, because, several European politicians, for instance, the Polish Prime Minister just a few days ago, have claimed that there will be an urgent need for another Marshall Plan for Europe because of the crisis now, yes? Of course, we in Europe won't get any support from the US, as we all know. The only country which has some reserves, regardless of the crisis, is China. So I think that several countries in Europe will be really in need and in hope of getting Chinese investments quite soon. Yes. So that's the advantage of China. I guess that anyway, in different countries all over the world, this confrontation will become visible in the coming months. Even in such countries which are not in the center of our attention, like the Middle East or Northern Africa. I guess we'll be talking about that also in one of our next podcasts, yes?
Absolutely, yes. And we are now far too quick, but we are already at the end of our recent podcast about United States versus China. But I think we will discuss this topic very soon again, because there are now a lot of things happening, and of course we will follow the events in the United States if it comes to such a law trial. And you will report hopefully about the best documents and speeches of US congressmen.
Yes, let's make it our tradition, yes, to trace that. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and all the best. We wish health for our listeners, and let's meet. Right.
Very last question for the end, because I think all our listeners want to know about that. We heard a noise some minutes ago. These were not German Corona bombers over Poland, right?
Not yet, I guess, although I haven't watched Polish TV since several months, so, okay. Perhaps I don't know about something, yes?
Okay, I will check and tell you next time.
Okay, let me know.
Okay, thank you so much. See you, bye-bye.
See you, bye, all the best.
This program was presented to you by Manuel Ochsenreiter and Mateusz Piskorski, the hottest dissident who won't violate any time the global rules against racism, extremism, or any other bad isms.